thank you so much for joining our Zoom session. So this is actually one of the second Zoom sessions I've run for UKHarvest, and we're doing these Zoom educational sessions because we're unable to kind of get out and work in the community as we usually do. So first of all, for those of you that don't know, I'd like to give you a bit of an overview of UKHarvest and my role there. And for those of you that do know, you can just hear this again. So UKHarvest are a not-for-profit food rescue operation, and we collect quality excess food from commercial outlets, and we deliver it free of charge to charities and organisations in need, which is really varied. And as well as this, we are also on a mission to eliminate food waste and empower people to lead healthy, active lifestyles through the food they eat. Now, sadly, as I mentioned, as a result of COVID-19, we've not been able to run a lot of our community sessions called Nourished, which is why we're working in a different way through virtual means as we are now. So a little bit about me. I am UKHarvest Education and Outreach Coordinator, working across London and West Sussex. And I also am an Associate Nutritionist with the Association for Nutrition. That is where my studies have led me to where I am now. So before we get started, I'm going to be doing lots of talking, but hopefully not too much boring talking. And you might want to take notes, but if you don't feel like that, don't worry, because what we're going to do at the end of the session is send you out a fact sheet on everything we've spoken about. The Zoom is also being recorded. Don't worry, your faces aren't going to be on there. It's just recorded so we can put it up on our YouTube channel to share with anybody and everyone. So if you would like to tell people about today's session, they'll be able to listen to it back. So let's get started. What are we going to talk about today? So we're going to cover everything to do with food and mood. We're going to start off by establishing if what we eat really can influence how we feel, and we're going to look at the science behind that. Now, after the session, as I mentioned, we'll be sending out the PDF to this, but if you want to ask questions throughout, what I'd ask is if you put it in the chat bar, or note it down on a piece of paper. We're going to have a chance to all chat at the end and kind of spread knowledge and spread information. Okay, so don't worry, at the end we can all have a chat about what we've spoken about. Okay, now let's get started. So first we'll start with something very obvious. Now, we have some really clear examples of the way food can impact how we feel. If you've ever had a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, it really does shift the way your brain functions, i.e. you're more lively and energetic off a cup of coffee because of that caffeine, or you're more sleepy or mellow from a glass of wine, or depending how much you've had, you might go the other way. Now, the effects of alcohol and caffeine are obviously quite sudden. We feel it straight away, whereas the food we eat are much more accumulative. They happen slowly over a period of time. For example, a salad is not going to make you the happiest person jumping off the walls with happiness. It's about what we eat over a period of time that's going to affect the way your brain functions. Now, because I studied nutritional sciences, a science degree, I'm all for understanding the mechanisms as to why and how what we eat can influence how we feel. So we're going to start by looking at the gut-brain axis. Now, without sounding too sciencey, there is a constant two-way communication that occurs between our brain and our gut, and this is referred to as the gut-brain axis. So what we're going to do is going to look at these two organs separately, and then we're going to piece them together. So the gut is part of our gastrointestinal system, which is a big word, but all it is the organs that make up the food, our digestion of food. So it takes food from point of consumption to point of evacuation, basically. And in our gut, we have something called our gut microbiota, which is trillions and trillions of bacteria in our gut. Now, you might think this sounds really not good. Why do we need gut bacteria? Bacteria can sometimes sound like a negative word, but when we're talking about our gut health, it's a really positive thing. Recent advances in research have described the importance of our gut microbiota in influencing communication with our brain. So, our brain. The brain works like a big computer. It processes the information that it receives from the body and our senses, and it feeds it back to the rest of our body. But the brain can do so much more than that. Our brain can experience emotions, and it's used to for us when we make decisions, when we read, when we speak, and so much more. Now, piecing the two together, our gut and our brain are in communication all the time, as we know. So on a very basic level, it makes sense that we must look after our gut and what goes into it, as our gut communicates with our brain, and our brain controls our feelings and emotions. Now, the science behind this gut-brain axis is quite new. However, the gut feeling, for example, is something we've all felt before. Think about when we say, oh, I've not got the guts for that, or I've got a gut feeling, or I can't stomach that behavior. Clearly, for a long time, we've known that our gut is related to our feelings. So now we all know that what we eat can influence how we feel, really. If we feel like we're eating really well, we generally feel quite good, and vice versa. If we're not eating very well, we generally can feel a little bit rubbish. Now, it can be quite confusing to know what to fuel our bodies with to make us in a good mood, because there's a lot of kind of conflicting evidence out there, and a lot of things which aren't true. So throughout the rest of the session, we're going to look at 10 ways in which you can eat a healthy, balanced diet in certain ways to boost your mood. Does anybody have any questions about the gut-brain axis before we move on to discuss our 10 top mood boosting tips? No, and no one waving. Fabulous. Okay. So before we get started on that, I asked you all at the beginning of the session what your mood boosting foods were, and got some really great contributions. I think we got 2 were ice cream and chocolate, if I'm correct. And those 2 were really in those kind of foods at the end of the session, because those are what we would kind of class as comfort foods. And comfort foods do react in a different way to these kind of mood boosting foods that we're going to talk about today. As a nutritionist, I do often get asked, what is one food that can boost my mood forever? What is going to make me the happiest person if I eat tons and tons of it? And the answer is, unfortunately, there is not one particular food that is going to influence our mood in a really significant way. It's about what we do and what we consume over a period of a day or a week or even months and years. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people are holding out for that kind of magic bullet, but unfortunately that just doesn't exist in nutrition. So my first mood boosting tip for you all is carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates, this might sound a bit boring, but carbohydrates are the body's main source of energy. Starchy carbohydrates are very easily broken down into glucose, which is what travels around in our body and fuels our body and our brain. Glucose is the only fuel our body can use, so keeping topped up on carbohydrates at every meal is really, really important. Now, what we can do is eat certain carbohydrates that our brain loves even more, and those are whole grain, high fiber varieties. So these are things like our whole grain cereals, our brown rice, whole grain breads, whole wheat and oats. They usually are really dark, nutty, seedy varieties of carbohydrates. One thing we can do on top of having a carbohydrate with every meal is to eat regularly. Now, ideally, we need to eat 3 meals a day, plus snacks if you feel like you need them. And this is to regulate our blood sugar levels. Now, if you all try and think back to a time when you skipped a meal. How do you feel? You feel quite low, you might feel a bit dizzy, very hungry, not kind of with it. And that is because your blood sugar has taken such a dip that that sugar going around in your blood is not fueling your brain properly. And that's why we're all quite slow. So the top tips to avoid this state of hunger and eating regularly is to follow those 3 meals a day. And if you are snacking, which is absolutely fine, depending on the person you are, snack smart. What I mean by snack smart is not choosing high fat, salt and sugar snacks, things like our biscuits and our chocolates and our sweets, which unfortunately are very easy to just grab at from the co-op or other supermarkets, or out of our cupboard in our house. Unfortunately, these are not the best things. The best types of things to snack on are, again, our high fiber foods. So our fruit with a little bit of yogurt, or a hummus with some vegetable sticks. Think about those healthy, balanced snacks. Now, it's the high fiber in these starchy carbohydrates we discussed previously that are a great way of managing our hunger levels here. Now, alongside our carbohydrate with every meal and eating regularly, we should eat lots of plant foods. Now, the more plant foods consumed in the diet, the more diverse your gut microbiota, as they thrive off plant foods. They love the fiber they find when we eat fruits and vegetables and pulses. Now, what do plant foods include? So of course they include fruits and vegetables, but they also include legumes, which are beans, lentils and pulses. So things like our kidney beans, our chickpeas, and things that they're made out of. So for example, hummus and chili, for example, if you're having a chili bean stew. Now, the reason why plant foods contain a lot of fiber, the reason why our guts love our plant foods is because they do contain a lot of fiber, but also vitamins and minerals. Now, we all know vitamins and minerals are a really positive thing in our diet. For example, vitamin C, just one vitamin alone can actually help fight infection and keep our cells really strong. Now, remember, it's really simple and easy to think of having fresh fruit and vegetables, but sometimes we're not that organised. We've missed a shop. And one way you can make sure you've always got plant foods to eat is buying frozen, tinned and dried. They all count towards these plant foods. Now, there is a dietitian called Dr. Megan Rossi, and she specialises in gut health. And she's done a study which showed that those that had 30 plant foods a week, compared to those that only had 10, had a diverse range of gut bacteria, which, as we know, is a really good marker of gut health. So have a think about how many plant foods you have in a week. Have a little pad, or look at the notes in your phone, maybe from Monday, see how many you're having and see if you can up the amount to try and reach 30. Remember, things like herbs and spices do also count as well, so don't forget those. Hydration is key. Now, being even slightly dehydrated is enough to cause anyone to be a little bit moody, problems concentrating, headaches, and fatigue. It can also affect the way our gut functions, causing constipation, which puts no one in a good mood. So our top tips for keeping hydrated is to aim for 6 to 8 glasses a day, which is about 3 to 4 pints of water. It's quite hard to imagine that, but generally water recommendations depends on the climate. So for example, today is a really hot day and we probably need more water than if it was a very cool day. Now, my top tip is always have a glass of water in front of you. I've got mine here, as always. I do follow my own rules. And always have a bottle of water in your bag. That way you will always have water to keep you hydrated. And how do you know if you're not hydrated? The best way is really simple, just to look at your wee if you go to the toilet. We want it to be as clear as possible. We don't want any apple juice coloured urine, really. And if you don't like water, or you know some children, whether they're your friends or your grandchildren or your children, a lot of children might go, I don't like water. And one really good way to get water into their diet is by adding chopped up fruit, getting them to choose which fruits they like and adding it to the water as a flavouring, rather than using full sugar squash. Sugar-free squash is a really good alternative as well, but of course, whole fruit is better. Omega-3. So omega-3 is an essential fatty acid, and we call it an essential nutrient as our bodies cannot make it. We must consume it in our diet. 60% of our brain is actually made up of fats such as omega-3. So making sure we consume them is really, really important. Not a lot of people do. Now, as well as keeping our brains healthy, studies have shown that a diet high in omega-3 can also decrease the risk of heart disease. In Icelandic countries, the risk of heart disease is very low because they eat a lot of oily fish. Now, the best source of omega-3 oils are from oily fish and seafood, and we should try and consume this at least once a week. Now, if you don't like fish, or you're a vegetarian or a vegan, you can obtain omega-3 from plant sources, but you're just going to have a little bit more and a little more often. So try certain nuts such as walnuts, almonds and pumpkin seeds, oils from rapeseed and linseed, and soya products and green leafy vegetables. So think of your kales and your cabbage. Those are great for omega-3. Alongside omega-3, we should make sure we're getting enough protein. And the reason being is because proteins contain amino acids, kind of like the building blocks of protein. And these amino acids help make up the chemicals in your brain, such as serotonin, which regulate our thoughts and feelings. Now, protein also helps control our blood sugar levels throughout the day. Once consumed with carbohydrates and some vegetables, you've got a really healthy, balanced meal. Mood boosting tip number 8 is to cut down on the caffeine. Now, caffeine is a stimulant. It's actually classed as a drug, we sometimes forget. And it can be really useful for performing athletes, as it gives them that big spike in energy, but it can have a negative effect on our everyday health if we consume too much of it. Having too much caffeine can agitate our guts. It can cause some gut issues, and it can actually, as well as that, make you feel quite anxious, a bit jittery. Have a think about a time where you really have overdone it on the coffee when you've been a bit tired one day. It really doesn't kind of promote that kind of continuous energy levels as we would really hope to get. So it's difficult to assign an exact amount of caffeine for everyone because people all have different sensitivities and different reactions. Now, when looking at the recommended amounts, I found that, because I didn't know this, caffeine, we should have no more than 4,000 milligrams a day. And that is actually 5 espresso shots. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if I had 5 espresso shots, I would be jumping off the walls. So my recommendation to you is we don't need caffeine in our diet to lead a healthy, balanced diet and boost our mood, really. So if we can reduce caffeine intake to as little as possible, that's going to really keep our gut functioning healthy and our gut microbiota happy, as well as making us feel a little bit better as well. Number 9, dabble in fermented foods. Now, despite the popularity in recent years, fermented foods have been around for decades. They have been a way of preserving foods. Now, what are fermented foods? As I said, they're quite new, so they're not something everybody's heard of. And fermented foods describe the process in which bacteria and yeast transform food and drinks. So they create living microbes in this food product or this drink, which our gut microbiota love. On the whole, the scientific evidence behind fermented food is quite limited. There's been some really, really confounding studies, but there's not been enough high quality studies to show the massive benefits. However, if we incorporate at least 1 or 2 fermented foods into our 30 plant foods a week, then we're not going to be doing any harm. We could actually be doing a lot of good. And when it becomes really, really popular, you'll definitely be ahead of the game. Number 9, ditch the diet. So between gluten-free, dairy-free, carb-free, and vegetable-free, I could go on, there is an array of restrictive diets, which most of us have probably had a go at some time in life. Now, eliminating food from your diet without any medical reason not to can actually cause more problems than it's worth. As we know, our guts love variety, especially of plant foods, but they also like being fed lots of different types of food. And if we end up cutting out big food groups such as dairy or kind of a lot of fat, so fat we get from plant sources but also animal sources from protein, it can actually cause more issues for our gut. And finally, we have number 10, and this is looking beyond the diet. Now, these are not actually food related, which doesn't tie with my aim of this Zoom. However, the importance of sleep, stress reduction and exercise for overall health and mood boosting properties is huge. Now, think about when you've been sleep deprived. It can actually cause us to feel really low, in a bad mood, with not feeling very motivated, and that is because of the lack of energy. And when we're tired, it can also influence how and what we eat in quite a negative way. A recent study looked at how being just slightly sleep deprived can actually influence us to eat more than we actually need. And usually when we're tired, I don't know about you, but you go and grab something quick and easy and comforting. And usually that's not something that kind of ticks all the boxes we've been talking about today. Now, stress. Now, we don't have to feel stressed for our body to be under stress. We all lead, a lot of us might lead very busy lifestyles and feel very run down and drained, but our brain and our bodies are not cut out for this. It can cause stress without even feeling like being stressed. So really common ways at the moment of de-stressing is things like practicing mindfulness and practicing yoga. Now, these are all very popular. However, I say do what de-stresses you. Go on a walk, or literally just sit with a cup of tea and have a chill time. De-stressing should be a really important part of your days. And finally, exercise. Exercise and movement, we know, is good for us. When we exercise and move, our body actually releases chemicals called dopamine and endorphins, and these are also known as our happy hormones. I always say, if I am feeling very unmotivated to exercise, you never regret exercising. You never come back and think, oh, I wish I didn't do that. And that is because of those happy hormones being released. They kind of fight off any kind of bad feelings you've got. So I hope these 10 tips have maybe taught you something new, or at least reinforce your knowledge about how you can use food as well as de-stressing methods, exercise and movement to boost your mood. Now, I hope it's been interesting, and I'm also, I've put these on here, but I'm going to share these with you after the session. These are some really useful websites and books if you are interested in learning more about your gut health on a more scientific level. These are really interesting, and I've also put something in there about a sleep hygiene protocol, which is really good if you are struggling with your sleep. So thank you all for listening. I hope we have lots of questions. I am going to open the chat now and have a look. If we could unmute everyone, and we can all have a bit of a chat about what we've spoken about just now. Okay, we don't have anything in the chat, but does anybody have any questions or anything we'd like to kind of look back on?
Oh, yeah, the question.
Yes.
Let me have a look. Where was the question? It was when you were going through proportions.
Yes.
Yeah, because the plant food, you said 1 palm of fruit, 2 palms of veg.
Yes.
Was that per day?
Yes. So that is not a day, that's a portion. So so we have kind of 2 recommendations. We have our 5-a-day recommendation, which is kind of a government recommendation. So we should always try and achieve that. However, the actual 5-a-day scheme found that 10 a day is actually more beneficial to health. So if you can get more than 5 and up to 10, that's amazing. 30 plant foods is a separate recommendation in terms of gut health. But the reason it was a palm of fruit and kind of 2 palms of vegetables is 1 portion, and that's due to fruit containing more sugar. Now, that doesn't mean we should avoid fruit at all. Whole fruit and the sugar found in whole fruit is nothing to be concerned about. It's the sugar in things like fizzy drinks and sweets and chocolate that we should be more mindful of and should be reducing. Hope that clears that up a bit.
Yeah, I thought it looked low, but yeah, that's good. Yeah.
A portion, yes. Yes, Lucy.
Do you have any materials available that, like a simple handout or something? So I run something called Free Shop Friday, where we have all sorts of people coming and just picking up the food that would go to waste.
Yeah.
And it's good to be able to talk to people and just sort of, ask them maybe about their diet.
Of course.
So I just wondered, do you have like a simple handout or anything that's accessible?
So on the back of this Zoom, I will be handing out a handout specifically for this Zoom. We are exploring new ways of working with community groups because obviously we can't get out and about like we usually would, and we're always looking to work with new groups. So that's definitely a conversation we can have afterwards and see if there's any particular resources you would like sharing.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Any other questions? I would just like to talk about our chocolate and our ice cream now. So our chocolate and ice cream, I do agree, are mood boosting foods, but in a kind of other way. It's kind of the other way around. If we think about these foods, these are foods that we eat to boost our mood rather than, if we're in a low mood, for example, it's those foods that we want to eat. Now, these we want to eat mainly for comfort. They're usually things that are quite nostalgic to us, and they tend to be sweet and fatty or warm things like pie or chocolate, ice cream. If anybody has any other examples, it's usually things that we've grown up on as well, that kind of can take us back to a time. Now, unfortunately, these kind of foods, as we know, ice cream shouldn't be consumed every day, and neither should chocolate. So they are kind of switched around. They might influence our mood in a negative way, but if we're in a low mood and we need a bit of a pick-me-up because they do put a smile on our face, there is no reason why we shouldn't have those foods to kind of boost our mood in that other way. Brilliant. Well, does anybody else have any questions? If not, I've all sent you the email with the link on. So if you'd like to contact me separately to chat about anything else or any other questions, please do. Michelle? Oh.
Sorry, it's not a question. It's just I've been amazed at how quickly I've put on weight during this lockdown. you know, and it's just been incredible. And especially at the start, because, you know, you were talking about the foods that are not so good for you, and it was like, oh yeah, let's have, you know, let's have something for tea that will cheer us up, and that'll be really nice. And then, oh, let's have, you know, aperitifs with nibbles before dinner. That would be great. And then that, and it was like, oh my God, like after several days of that, it was like, oh, I can't keep this up. It's just too much.
You're definitely not alone there. And I experienced that as well. It was a kind of way of keeping happy as well, because food does make us happy. It shouldn't be, we should never demonize foods. I know I've spoken about all these quite like typically healthy foods, but we do need those foods to kind of to keep us going. For example, people enjoy baking and sweet treats, but no, you're not alone, Michelle. And I think it's that change in movement as well. When we're confined to our own homes, only able to go out on maybe when it was a walk a day, it can, that kind of change in movement and that change in and out of what's going into our body can change really quickly. So but no, I think we've all realized now that it's gone on longer than we imagined, sadly. So we need to do something about it.
I was just going to say as well that a few years ago, because I was told I had high cholesterol, so I decided to look at, you know, what the healthy foods were, and I did find a really good thing on the Heart Foundation website, which has got some really good, like, little plans, you know, that you can follow. But so I started doing a food diary, what I ate every day, and within quite a short time, probably, you know, after a few days, after a week or so, I started to completely change what I was eating. But then after maybe 2 weeks, I thought, oh, I don't need to do that anymore because I know what I'm doing. And I found that it just slipped, you know, after a while, because I wasn't tracking anymore. Because by doing the diary, like I would write things down and I think, oh, you know, I'd sort of look at it and think, oh yeah, no, I need to do this. Or,
that one,
you know. And by not doing the diary, it's just, you know, you haven't got that feedback and you can't really see what's going on, even though you think, you know.
It can be a really useful.
But that's just a kind of tip, really, for other people who might find that helpful. I think I need to go back to doing it.
Yeah, I can completely agree. And not, as you did, not even to show someone your food diary, but just for you to kind of see what you eat throughout the day, like you said, can be really helpful, especially if we are at home. I've been working from home, I'm currently in my kitchen, and so easy to just pop in the fridge and grab something, isn't it? And we forget about all those little things we do. So but I have been saying to people, do be kind to yourself during quarantine, because these have been quite challenging times for people, and if we do put on a few pounds, it is not the end of the world. Our happiness is more important than that, and our contentment.
Thank you.
No problem. Does anybody else have any questions or anything on the back of those kind of chats? No? Fabulous. Well, what I'm going to do is, as I said, I'll be sending out a fact sheet by the end of the week on food and moods.